Alright, I thought this next video was maybe appropriate to do, as I had a student ask me here yesterday about, they were being asked to solve some equations, but they really weren't being asked what the answers were. The student was being asked to determine if there was one solution to the equation, were there no solutions to the equation, or were there infinitely many solutions to the equation. And I think it's important for students to recognize when you solve a basic algebra equation, is there only one answer? Is there potential for no answers or no solutions? Or is there potential for a lot of answers, or specifically infinitely many answers? And I want to look at those three different situations. So if I take the first equation, I came up with 4x subtract 3 equals 2x subtract plus 5. At some point when you're solving these, remember it's about opposite operations, but at some point it's also about, I always said letters on one side, numbers on the other. So if I look at the terms here, the 4x and the 2x, at some point I want to get those terms that have x in it on the same side. I like to have the x's on the left side, so I would love to move that 2x over to the left side. It's a plus 2x where it's at, so I need to, in this case, subtract 2x. And if I subtract, remember from the previous video where we talked about solving equations, if I subtract 2x from one side, I have to subtract 2x from the other side. So in this case, 4x subtract 2x leaves me with 2x. I had 4x's and now I got rid of 2x's, so I'm left with a positive 2x. I've put my x's on one side. At the same point, I would love to have the numbers on the other side. Remember I said at some point, letters on one side, numbers on the other. So these two terms that have x in them are going to be on the left side. The numbers are going to be on the right side. The question is, how do I get rid of a subtract 3? Remember, it's about opposite operations. So I'm going to then add 3. I'm going to eliminate the 3's here. The minus 3 and the plus 3 will drop out. I will also add 3 to this side, which gives me 2x equals 8. So hopefully you see here that I subtracted 2x from this side. I also did it from this side. That put my x's on the left side. I wanted to get the numbers to the other side, so I said, well, let's get rid of the subtract 3 by adding 3. I added 3 here and gave me an 8. Now I'm looking between these and I see that it's 2 times x, so the opposite of multiplying would be dividing. What I do to one side, I must also do to the other side. The 2's drop out and I'm left with x equals 4 for an answer. And in this case, you can see that I got one solution, which is what you typically get when you're working through a lot of algebra equations, is you will get one answer. Now I want to look at a special situation. In this case, we have 4x subtract 3 equals 4x plus 5. I'm going to do what I did to start with. I'm going to focus on these two terms that have x's. And in my mind, I'm going to get the x's to the left side of the equation. I'm going to send the numbers to the right side, very similar to what I did in the previous problem. How do I get rid of this plus 4x? I would subtract 4x. A plus 4x and a minus 4x would drop out, but I have to also subtract 4x here. Now, we might say that they drop out, but on the left side, I want to write how many x's I actually have. If I had 4x to start with, and I subtract 4x, I have 0x on the left side, or 0 x's on the left side. I'm now going to subtract 3, or I'm going to get rid of the subtract 3 by adding 3. The minus 3 and the plus 3 would drop out, and I will also add 3 on this side. So I hope you look at this problem and say, I did a lot of the same things I did here. I tried to get the x's to the left side, I tried to get the numbers to the right side. But in this case, because my x's dropped out, or there were none, I simply wrote 0x. And the reason I did that is for the next step. Remember, there's multiplication right here, and this says 0 times some number is 8. And I'd like you to think just a little bit about 0 times what number would give you 8. And hopefully you say to yourself, well, 0 times anything is 0. I don't think I can take 0 times anything and ever get 8. This situation right here is not even possible. Therefore, we have no solution. And that no solution resulted from this equation right here that simply said 0 times something should be 8, and we said to ourselves, that isn't going to be able to happen. Now if I look at the next situation here, again I'm going to follow the same idea. I'm going to look at my two terms that have x's in them, and I'm going to move the x's this way, and I'm going to move the numbers that way. So I will subtract 2x as I did before, and I will subtract 2x as I did here. Notice again, 2x subtract 2x is going to be 0x. Yes, they dropped out on the other side. I know they were 0x as well, but I'm going to just consider them dropped out. Here I'm going to simply write 0x to remind myself how many I have. This is a plus 1, so I will subtract 1, and I'm left with the situation 0x equals 0. Again, I want to look at this, and this says 0 times some number is 0. So the question really comes about 0 times some number is 0. What number could you put in for x, multiply it by 0, and get 0? And in this case, I believe you could put any real number in there. We could put the number 1 in here. 0 times 1 would still be 0. 0 times 7 would still be 0. 0 times negative 15 would still be 0. We put any number we wanted in. So in this case, there would be infinitely many solutions. There's a lot of numbers out there that would work. In fact, in our number system, the real number system, any of those numbers would work. We're not going to worry about solving it. We're simply going to say that there would be infinitely many solutions. So if we back up and look here, in this case we were able to get, and I'll slide this down just a little bit, but we're able to come up with just one answer. So this is a typical algebra equation where you simply get one solution. The answer wasn't one, but we simply had one answer in this basic algebra equation. In this equation, the key is that something special happened. And what special happened is we ended up with 0 x's. Much different than over here where we ended up with 2 x's when we got to this point. We're able to divide by 2. But in this case, we ended up with 0x. And anytime you end up where your variables cancel out, it's either going to be no solutions or infinitely many solutions. And in this case, there was no solutions because the number on the other side was 8. 0 times something can never be 8. Therefore, we had no solution. This equation right here cannot happen. And the key was the 0x, and the other key was the fact that this number turned out to be 8. And lastly, if we look at the other side, we had something very similar happen in that when we moved our variables to the left side, we were left with 0x on this side, but this time the number over here turned out to be 0. So this tells us, because it's 0x, it's either no solution or all real numbers. Everything's going to work. It's infinitely many. But in this case, 0 times something will be 0. Well, 0 times anything is, so the fact that it was anything, it allowed us to have infinitely many solutions. There's a quick video, and hopefully that helps you out just a little bit on determining if you have one answer, no answers, or infinitely many answers when solving an algebra equation.